Hi, this is Paul from My Trading Buddy, and this is the Elliott Wave Bootcamp that accompanies the Elliott Wave Indicator Suite for Think or Swim trading platform. So part one, we're going to talk about Elliott Wave rules and observations for swing trading. I need to go through the disclaimer. Swing trading, day trading, short-term trading, options trading and futures trading are extremely risky undertakings. They generally are not appropriate for someone with limited capital, little or no trading experience and or low tolerance for risk. Never execute a trade unless you can afford and are prepared to lose your entire investment. All operations involve serious risks and you can lose your entire investment. No trades or recommendations or advice, and we cannot be sued for losses of capital. All trades are for educational purpose only. Contact your broker or RIA for execution, margin and other capital requirements. Everyone watching the presentation adheres to all disclaimers on optionhacker.com, alphashark.com and mytradingbuddy.com. Okay. So Elliott wave theory is a common sense method of measuring trends and corrections. Corrections are a lot harder to trade. The high probability trades that we're interested in using this indicator suite are trading with the trend. So that's what we're going to concentrate on for this bootcamp. So why? Why do we use Elliott wave? Individual stocks are in their own cycles. Okay, so they have earning cycles, dividends, news, and we need a way of measuring that. So, when all of these things happen, the herd mentality of traders and their reactions form patterns of movement and momentum within these cycles. So we need a way to label and represent this pattern of those reactions in a meaningful way, respecting the same rules over and over again, so we can start to determine how that trend is performing and measure that trend, and that's how we use Elliott waves. So we have rules that can't be broken when we're using Elliott wave theory, and we're going to go through those now. So rule 1, the wave 2 must not retrace further than the origin of wave 1. So prime example there, we have the wave 1, start of the bullish trend here. It then retraces on the wave 2, but this wave 2 doesn't retrace back below the origin of wave 1. So that's the first rule. Rule 2, wave 3 is always the longest impulse wave. So as you can see here, we've had the 1, the 2, the longest impulse wave is wave 3. We've had the wave 4 pullback and then a wave 5, and the wave 3 is the longest. That rule is very, very important, as you'll see when we start to do examples. The wave 4 must not pull back beyond wave 1 extreme. So as you can see here, we've put the whole 5 wave Elliott wave sequence in there, but the wave 4 pullback here does not pull back beyond the pivot point of wave 1 there. If that happens, it fails. Okay, so the wave 4 must pull back before the top of wave 1. So they're the 3 rules. Now we're going to talk about some observations. So these are not set in stone, but they sort of give you that warm and fuzzy feeling when they occur, and they occur very often. So these are important observations to note when you're trading Elliott waves. So if wave 2 is simple, then wave 4 is most likely to be more complicated, and vice versa. So if wave 2 is complicated, then wave 4 is usually simple. So we've got an example here, very, very simple example. very simple wave 2 and then a complex wave 4. So the wave 4 starts, it tries to move back out on the wave 5, but it fails and the sellers take over again, and we end up getting a complex wave 4. So wave 1 and wave 5 tend to be the same size, and we use this as a guide to look for potential targets for our fifth wave, because we're trading the fifth wave, and we'll go on to that in a little while. But we use that to help us look for targets as well as other things. So you can see on this chart, wave 1 and wave 5 are pretty much the same length. Also, you can see a simple wave 2 and a complex wave 4. So 2 observations together on that chart. So observation 3, when swing trading the wave 4, pullback has 3 zones that give probabilities of a new wave 5 high being formed. So, and these zones, you'll have noticed on your indicator suite, are already automatically put in there for you, and they move dynamically as the wave 3 makes new highs. So if the wave 4 pullback comes back into the first zone, this green zone here, that's between the 0.25 retracement and the fib 0.382 retracement of the extremes of wave 2 and 3. But for the purposes of the indicator suite, we've made that very simple. You have to make no measurements. It measures the 2 extremes for you and automatically adjusts those zones. So the first zone, if the wave 4 pullback finds support within this zone, it's an 85% probability it's then going to turn, and once it turns, it's going to make a new wave 5 high. The second zone, if it finds support in there, starts to turn up and move away, you've got an 80% probability. So it's still a high probability trade that's going to go on and make a new wave 5. And the third zone is a 75% probability. If it goes past the 0.618 retracement, past this zone, you're rolling the dice a little bit. It becomes a lower probability trade. It's not to say that that wave 5 won't happen, it's just a lower probability. And we're interested in high probability trades. Okay, why don't we trade the wave 3, Trevor? The wave 3 is very difficult to trade because you don't know when it's going to end. And at the point on a chart when it starts, you don't actually know it's a wave 3. So when we talk about these rules and observations, if all of these rules observations happen and occur, the wave 1 happens, the wave 2 doesn't pull back below the low of wave 1. The wave 3 is the longest. The wave 4 pulls back into these zones and start to move back into the main trend. That fifth wave is the highest probability move, and you're going to get the highest probability win rate for that move there. Now, in 50 or 60% of the cases, that wave 5 then turns into a wave 3 when it gets longer by about 120%-ish of the original wave 3. So in half of the cases, and we can look at some in a little while, you are trading the wave 3, but at that point in time, you've met all the criteria, all the observations, you've met all the rules, and all the other indicators that we talk about in the strategy in the next session, and you're trading that high probability move. If that high probability move then continues to go higher and higher and higher and forms new wave 3, that's a good thing. But you can't predict the future, and it's very difficult to trade that wave 3. And we can show you some examples on the charts. So observation 4, when swing trading the wave 4 pulls back between 90 and 140% of the highest point of wave 3 on a 335 oscillator. Now this is part of the indicator suite as well. It's not usually on its sort of Elliott wave software, but I've included it because it's a very important observation and part of my strategy. So the indicator is different colors on there, but basically the highest point of the wave 3 on the indicator here, we do a retracement, and we're going to go through how to do that. And the wave 4 pullback on the oscillator is between 90 and 140%. And that really gives you a lot of confidence. Once that crowns and starts to move back, that's a really good observation, and it's an integral part of the strategy. You're going to get that high probability move. Just go back a second. So we'll go through those zones again, but really if the wave 4 is too shallow, you're not going to get enough risk to reward, and we talk about risk to reward in the next session. You need enough risk to reward in your strategy so that there's enough fresh air for that wave 5 to the target to give you a decent risk to reward. So if it does pull back quite shallow and doesn't quite make that 0.25, then it's quite likely it's going to fail. But more importantly, you've not got enough room between your entry and the potential wave 5 high for a good risk to reward. But we're going to build that picture. So trend failure. Now, sometimes when we're observing these Elliott waves and we're checking on the charts every day, some of these trends will fail. So we've just gone through them now. What are the two instances that I have just discussed that present trend failure? Can anybody tell me? The rules, some of the two of the rules. Okay. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's correct. In both instances. So when the wave 2 must not retrace further than the origin of wave 1, and the wave 4 must not pull back beyond wave 1 extreme. If any of those rules are broken, the trend is over and you've gone into a corrective phase and very hard to trade. So that then becomes an ABC correction, very hard to trade, and again it's failed, so you're not going to continue to look at that until that wave pattern gets back in again. You go to another stock. So any questions so far on the rules and observations that we've just talked about for the 5-wave Elliott wave sequence? Everybody good so far? Okay, let's continue. Let's get to some charts just to look at these observations and rules, and then we're going to go on to go into a little bit more depth. So this is a TOS platform. This is the Facebook chart, and I've put it on the weekly for now. Okay, just wanted to show you the weekly for now. We've had the wave 1, the wave 2, the wave 3, the wave 4's pulled back, found support at the bottom of that first zone, then moved higher, and we've had the 5th wave. Okay? So now, some things to talk about the indicator suite, and this is why we've gone to the charts now. So this is the 535 oscillator. As you can see, we've had the pullback here. To measure this is very simple. On the drawing tools, we want the Fibonacci extension, sorry. Okay, so we go to the highest point on the oscillator on wave 3, which is actually here, not here. Okay, the highest point in the oscillator is here, and this is the difference. This is a it's a histogram view of the space, the distance between the 5 and the 35 moving average. It just gives you that cross section view. So you got to the highest point on the wave 3, you go to 0, click again, bring it back to the highest point, click again, and then as you can see, we're between the 90 and the 140%. Now I've put this as my default, okay? Because I just wanted to show you quickly. So the way to do that is, obviously you all know TOS reasonably well. Let me just get on here. You can right click on the properties, you can change the colors, the width, and you can also put in, I've put a 0.9, 1.4 there, left all of the rest out, and just put the colors, put them nice and thick in there, and save it as default. So we're going to go through different time frames, Trevor, and that's part of the next section, part of this half of the boot camp, is we're talking about the big picture and the time frames and how to trade it. So we will be talking about that very soon. I just wanted to go through some of the rules and observations that we talked about before. So as we can see here, we've had a low, we've had a wave 1, the wave 2 has not come back below the origin of wave 1. The longest wave is wave 3. The wave 4 has not pulled back below the high of wave 1, and you could probably see from this low here, the high, the wave 5 now has broken that same length observation, and as soon as this wave 5 gets, if it gets longer than the wave 3, then this will turn into a wave 3. So that was the trade. One more thing you'll see on your indicator suite are these blue and red moving averages. Now these are special moving averages for this indicator suite, for this strategy. There are 6-4 moving average high is the blue, 6-4 moving average low is the red. So what it means is, for the 6-4 moving average high, it takes the highs of the last 6 days as an average, and then what it does, it moves them over to the right by 4 days. So in effect, you can see the moving average is ahead of last week. Yeah, and when we go down to the daily, you can see it again. And we use these for conservative entries and either long or short. Obviously the long is going through the 6-4 moving average high. If we're going short, it's going to go through the low. But also you can use, if you're going long, use the 6-4 moving average low as your trailing stop position. Okay? Okay, the bar number. So if you look on the 535 oscillator here, you've got some figures in yellow. Yeah, you've got what it's called, you've got the green and you've got the yellow figures. As I move my cursor, you'll see the candle number, the bar number move. That's the bar number, and that's how we can isolate that. And so I'm going to go to the daily now and show you how to isolate the wave count on this. So let's just go to the daily. Okay. Because you've got to be able to isolate the wave count in some circumstances to get the right call here. So what I want to do is I want to zoom in on the daily. At the moment the wave count's way back when, but we've got some correction here and we've got to recognize this correction here. Okay, we've got to understand that this is a corrective phase, and actually the next bullish trend started here. So we can actually move our cursor and see that that's bar number 395 down in the bottom on the yellow figures on the 535 moving oscillator. So then we go up to the little hourglass. This pulls up the indicator suite, and in the top one there, if you press on the gear, we can change the start bar number. So we're isolating the start of this trend so it counts the waves properly, and we said it was bar 395. Okay, and we apply that. Okay, so now we've got a true reflection of where that trend is on the daily time frame. The swing trading on the daily time frame is where we want to be. So let's just make that bigger. So we've had this corrective phase, got a tiny sort of pullback, we've had a gap, we've had this correction, we've had the low here, and then we've had a move higher. We've had a wave 2, obviously not come back past there. So this is Facebook on the daily. We've had a wave 3. The wave 4 has pulled back into the bottom of the first zone and then moved out, gone above the 6-4 moving average high, and that was the trade on Facebook. Big sell-off on Friday. So to determine the bar number on the 535 oscillator at the bottom, it's in the yellow figures. If you watch those figures now, as I move my bar, you'll see the bar count move. Okay, so right at the wave 4 there, it's 489. So that's how, and we're going to repeat this quite a lot of times by isolating the wave count and how to spot that. Okay. So that's the Facebook. We're going to do, what we're going to go to now is we're going to do some more slides. We're going to talk about the big picture, start to build up this strategy and the way that we're going to start to look for trades and understand the bigger picture. So just bear with me a second. Okay, so part 2 of the Elliott Wave Bootcamp, we're going to talk about the big picture trading techniques. We're going to start to build this strategy using this indicator suite. There's a lot going on in a particular stock, and there's a lot larger time frames we need to understand. So what we're going to do is going to break it down into 3 main time frames. We're going to start at the weekly and then move down, so we can understand the bigger picture to help us trade. So the benefits of building the big picture for every stock you're going to trade, you get a better idea of what's happening with a stock. So is it a trend or is it correction? The direction of the short, the medium and the long-term trend, reactions to earnings and news. In the past, how did it react to earnings? Does it gap up every time? Does the stock really not be affected by earnings? It helps you make better trading decisions and you get a better win rate. So the biggest question I always get, where do I start? That's the biggest question I get. Where do I start? Yes, you will get a copy of this bootcamp. Yep. So the long-term trend, we go to the weekly time frame. Okay, so the weekly chart. And the questions you got to ask yourself: what's the direction of the long-term trend? Is the trend respecting a channel? And we'll go through how to look for those and draw those on. Where is the long-term trend in respect to the Elliott wave count on the weekly chart? and where are the major support and resistance levels, because they're still very important, because they will come. We're not necessarily going to trade off the weekly time frame, but those support and resistance levels and that channel and how it's performing really dictate how we swing trade off the daily time frame. So this is an example. Okay, this is Dish. This is off the weekly time frame, and there's something I've prepared earlier here. As you can see, we've got earnings down the bottom here, but the main thing I want to talk about is we've got some resistance levels put in here on the weekly. I've then put some zones in here. So these zones pick up lots of pivot points, lots of sort of rejections, resistance levels, support level here, resistance level here. So that picks that zone up and we move it right, and we can see that's really affecting that right at this moment in time. And then we're going to go below where we are, and we see with some major support levels in this zone, some resistance, some support. So we're starting to build the picture on the weekly time frame. Okay, so we've put those zones, those support and resistance. We've also drawn the current bullish trend. It's respecting a channel. Okay, you can see the bottom trend line of the channel here, it's hit 3 or 4 times. The same with the top, and more importantly, the center line of the channel, you can see here has acted as support majorly, especially along the last sort of few months. And this is just another example of Facebook off the weekly chart, how tight that channel is here, how it keeps coming back into this channel, and that strong bullish trend. And again, every bar on there is a week, but once you've got that channel on and you go down to a daily time frame, you can start to swing trade within that channel. It does give you a bit of help, so we'll do some examples of that as well. So now the medium term trend. This is the daily time frame. So you want to continue to build the picture. So you need to understand the direction of the medium term trend. Is the trend respecting the weekly channel? If there is one and you've drawn it. You know, where is the medium term trend in respect to the Elliott wave count? Because that's one of the main things we've got this indicator suite for. Whereabouts is it? Is it priming up? Is it pulling back on a wave 4? And is it ready for us to go long or short? Where are the major support and resistance levels on the daily time frame? And now you've got to start looking for potential swing trading opportunities. We don't trade off the weekly, but the swing trading opportunities off the daily are very powerful. If that wave 4 has pulled back on the daily time frame and started to move back into the onto the main trend, the daily time frame is the one to trade off the swing trading time frame, because every single bar on that daily time frame chart is one whole session, one whole trading session. There's got an open, you've got a close, you've got a high, and you've got a low. That's a true reflection of how that market has reacted and traded that stock in that whole trading session. And then when you put all those daily bars together, it's a true reflection of how that trend is performing. Okay, Trevor, there's where the zones manually drawn in. I don't understand. Are you talking about the pullback zones? Because they're automatically drawn in on the indicator suite and go through that. The other zones that I talked about, I draw them in myself. And that's something you're going to have to do when you go to the weekly time frame. It's something that should always, again, this is why we're doing this big picture thing now, to understand, to work your way through. So this example is Dish again, but on the daily time frame. So we've gone down to the daily. You can see the weekly channel here, okay? You can see that it's respecting this weekly channel on the daily time frame. This is one of our zones that I drawn in from the weekly. As you can see, the wave 3 pulled back, found support in that zone that we drawn from the weekly, and then moved away, made a new wave 5 high, then it's gone sideways up, but it's kept this center line as support, gone up and made a new wave 5 high, and it's gone into that other weekly level. So then you'd be thinking, right, okay, I need to potentially start to take profit here because it's now hitting that major weekly resistance level. So the shorter term trend, the 60-minute time frame, again, this is intraday trading, and you still want to be able to trade intraday using this indicator suite, and we're going to show you an example in a minute. So you're going to complete the picture. So there may not have been a trade like we just saw. We've missed a trade on the daily time frame for Dish in this instance. So we're going to go down to the 60. So we can see the direction of the short-term trend. Is a trend respecting the weekly and all the daily channels that we've put in? You know, where is the short-term trend in respect to Elliott wave count again? And where are the major support and resistance levels? So, and we're going to be looking for potential swing or intraday trading opportunities. So again, using the same dish again, the same at that same time, I just worked my way through down the time frames. You can see now this is the weekly channel. This is the 60-minute time frame, so every bar is an hour. You can see now we've had the 1, the 2, the 3, and we're on a wave 4 pullback on intraday. Our zones are here, first, second and third zone, and you can see the center line of the weekly channel is right in our middle zone. We've got some previous congestion in this point here, so this is probably a good point where that wave 4 would find support. So the trade is not ready yet, but we are looking now. We've gone down the time frames. We understand it's in a strong bullish trend on the weekly. It's that is confirmed on the daily, but there's no trading opportunities. So now we then move down to the 60-minute time frame, and the wave 4 is happening right now. So we need to keep an eye on that, see if it finds support in this zone here, or even this one, and look for the entry, and that's in the next session. On the entry strategies, and trade that fifth wave on the 60-minute time frame all the way to the top of that weekly channel. Not necessarily. We're going to go through some examples, and we're going to again go back over isolating that wave count, because it's important to understand where that trend has started. So you may have to isolate the start of the wave count as you go down the time frames, sometimes, not every time. But again, I'm going to teach you how to recognize the start points of those trends, and just use the simple tool to isolate that wave count. Does that make sense, Trevor? Okay, let's go to the charts and have a look. So what I'm going to do now, I've got some current trades that I'm in, and I'm going to go through those first because I've prepared those so we can talk about them and go down the time frame. So I'm going to go, this is LEN I'm in at the moment, so I'm going to go to the weekly. Just going to zoom out of there, he says. So these are ones I've prepared earlier, but then we're going to do some actually drawing things on and everything like that. So this is the weekly time frame. There's no wave count on there at the moment because my wave count starts too early. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, first of all, we're just going to practice, and we're going to put the wave count to start at this high here, and that's bar number 167. So we go to here. You can see it's very corrective. You've got ABC correction all the time here. So the weekly time frame tells us it's quite, it's in a bit of a correction phase. We can actually isolate it a bit more, because obviously this is correction here. So we could actually perhaps start at the beginning of this channel that I've drawn. So we can adjust that to 231. And now, because of all this congestion here, there's no Elliott wave count. It's obvious because we're breaking the rules. But now we've started at a low pivot here. We can see we've had the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4. Okay? So now, by isolating that wave count on the weekly, we've been able to see that it is in a bullish trend. I've drawn this channel here. Again, you can see the low point of this channel really acting as support here. We've took in the high point of wave 3, but more importantly, this center line here acting as resistance here and here. So quite a good channel. What I've also done is put in this sort of high point here, because that's you know, it failed to move higher here, and also on the weekly failed here as well. I've put in these 2 pivot points here because they were major resistance and had big sell-offs. So I've put those in on my weekly. So I've built my weekly picture. Those are my weekly levels. So let's go, whoops, didn't want that. I want to go down now to go to the daily. And this is the one I'm in this trade at the moment. Okay. So now we're on the daily time frame. One thing we need to do, we just need to make sure we've got 1, 2, 3 at the top end of the weekly channel. The wave 4 came to the bottom end of the weekly channel. Okay, so it's respecting that channel, also respecting these weekly support levels, which are important. I haven't drawn it on because I wanted to go through it again. The wave 4 pullback on the oscillator needs to be measured. It needs to be between 90 and 140%. So again, fib extension. Whoops, that didn't take. Let's try that again. Highest point on the oscillator on wave 3 is here. We click, we go down to 0, we click again, we bring it back up to that high point and click again. So you can see the wave 4 pulled back, it crowned and came back again. So it was between the 90 and the 140% on the 535 oscillator. We're going to go through the isolating again. I'm using the fib extension, Arthur. I'll do it again. I'll delete it and do it again. Marabella, we're going to repeat how to isolate this wave count a lot of times. If you didn't understand it this time, go on to the next example and I'll show you again. For right now, I'm going to do this extension again. So let me just delete that. So 535 oscillator. We'll go to drawings tool. Whoops. We go down on the right hand side here, Fibonacci extensions. Can you see that, Arthur? So we've got that tool. We go to the highest point on the oscillator on wave 3. This is the third wave here. This is the highest point. We click once. We then bring the tool down to the 0 line. We click again. We then bring it back up, just bring it across. So you got this line here. So it comes to the top again, okay? And then click again, and that sets it. Okay, so you got the 90 and the 140%. Now, I've got this as my default. So to do that, just going to put this back onto the hand. You can right click on the fib extension here and you can edit properties. So in here, all you need, and you can change the number here as well, okay? You need 0.9 on 1.4, and you need the 0. So that's because that's your start point, and that's your high point on your wave 3. Then just change the color to green for 90 because it's got to go past that. That's why I call it green for go. And then the 140%, the 1.4, I put as a dark pink, red, or whatever it is, because if it goes past that, it's broken that rule. And then once you've changed those, click Set as Default, and that will set your fib extension tool as default. You can even change the name there, fib extensions, wave 4 pullback. Okay, set as default. Oh, that's too long. So wave 4, does that work? Yeah. Okay. So we'll be doing it a lot of times, Arthur, so yeah, hopefully that makes sense now. So let's just pull these down again. So at the moment, we're just going through the bigger picture. We've gone from the weekly on LEN. There was no trade there, but we actually put in a channel, a strong bullish trend on the weekly. We've come down to the daily. We found the wave 4 pullback. It's found support, and then we look for an entry, and I entered just above there on the just above the 6-4 moving average high. So let's zoom in a bit, and we'll go through entry strategies in the next session next weekend. But this basically now is hugging this channel, and it's still going strong. It's struggling to get past here. Quite strong resistance at the moment, but the trade is still good. So I'm swing trading this off a daily time frame. I don't, let's go down to the 60 to see if there's any other trading opportunities right now. So we're going to have to isolate the wave count, I think, if we're going to look for opportunities here. But again, I'm already in a trade on this. So how we would isolate this, why we would isolate this. Oh, blimey. So we've got a high here. So we can isolate this because it's actually, your software says it's a high. Okay, so this is potentially on the 60-minute the start of a bearish trend, and we can count that to see if there's an Elliott wave sequence there, because that's a high. That's found resistance at the center line of the weekly channel. It's made a high. That bar number is 143. That's what it says on the bottom here on the yellow. So I put my cursor on the bar there, 143. So we go to here, gear wheel, and we change that to 143. And we've done that because it's a high. So now you can see here the Elliott wave count is correct on the 60-minute chart. We've had the wave 1. We've had a double bottom there actually. The wave 2 has not come back beyond the origin of wave 1, but there's no trade there. We trade the 5th wave, and to be honest, we're trading the daily time frame. We're swing trading on a wave 4, so there's no trade there at the moment. Okay. Yeah, okay, Arthur, understood. Yeah, you will get the full video anyway. So let's just go back now to the weekly and go on to the next ticker, which is NLY. Okay. Again, I'm in this trade at the moment. I need to isolate the wave count from the low because I've just, again, it retains it in the memory from your last insertion. Again, we've got a low here on the weekly. This is the start of our wave count actually, and we've got the 1, the 2. We're on a wave 3, but it's not quite done that. So let's just isolate it anyway. 189. Go through the motions, because we're going from that low point. That's the potential start of that trend on the weekly. 189. Okay, so on the weekly there isn't really a channel that we can look at here on NLY. Okay, it's not really born, there's no major trend channel at the moment, because that was quite a long wave 1 on the weekly. We've had the wave 2 pullback, and now we're on the wave 3. The only thing we take from the weekly is this pivot point here. This was a major resistance level. Okay, one other we could take to help us would be this wave 1 pivot point here. Okay, because that was resistance, and so it could act as potential support as well. So that's our picture on the weekly. Don't want to go too overboard, just major pivot points, major support and resistance, that's all. So now we go to the daily. Okay, the 189 is on the 535 oscillator at the bottom, Marabella. You see where my cursor is now, there's some yellow figures. Yeah. So those yellow figures move as I move my cursor along here. So now we're at bar 394. Okay, so it's at the bottom here in this at the top of the 534, and as you move your cursor along it tells you the bar count. Okay, right, so we are now on the daily, and this is a good trade I'm in at the moment. So let's just go and talk about the observations, the rules, where it's pulled back to, and see how it's performing. Okay, so again, we've had this corrective phase after this little bearish trend. We've had the 1, the 2 just above the start of the wave 1, so that's fine. Nice long wave 3. The wave 4 pulled back at the bottom of my first zone and found support. Okay, I'll just enlarge the 535 to show you. The pullback on the wave 4 was between 90 and 140%. So really good setting up on the indicators that we're using so far. More importantly as well, we can see this previous support and resistance level from the weekly did also act as support for this daily profit taking pullback on the wave 4. So then I made a conservative entry here, a lot more conservative than the 6-4 moving average here, because I had these 2 pivot points during the wave 4 where it tried to get out and failed. So I actually went a little higher, and we'll talk about this in the next session about entry strategies. I went a little bit higher, but I'm in a lot of profit now. It's made a new wave 5 high, and it's still going. My target is 1240, and so far it's doing very, very well. So we've had the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and I'm trading the 5th wave. Okay, so the next one, so the next 2 are 2 very recent trades. They only triggered in the last couple of days of last week. So we're going to go to the weekly again to see how we always start at the weekly to build the big picture, the bigger picture. Sometimes you don't get the wave count on the weekly, but what you do is you get the support and resistance levels, which are going to be important for your trade. So as you can see on the weekly, it's very, very corrective. We've had a little bullish trend in here, and it's caught that. Now we've had some more correction, and now we've had a good solid move above this weekly resistance level. Formed a wave 1. The wave 2 was pulled back and found support at this previous resistance level on the weekly. So this on the weekly, it's meeting our rules so far. The next level on the weekly, this congestion level here, this pivot point here is important for us for our potential target on the daily. Plus, obviously, on the weekly, it's going to act as resistance. So let's go down to the daily time frame now. Zoom in and make it bigger. So the wave count's good here. I don't have to adjust it because we've had this corrective phase, and that's correct, going up and down like a roller coaster. Then we've had the 1, the 2. We've had a big pull out through that previous weekly resistance level. We've had the wave 3, and now it's pulled back, and that weekly resistance level is acting as now support. It's in our automatic zone. As you can see, it's sort of dithered around the bottom of that first zone, which is good. The 535 oscillators pulled back between the 90 and 140%. Everything's looking good, and I'm in this trade. So potential target level is this weekly here. Okay, as you can see, I entered literally just coming out of the 6-4 moving average high here. So this is I'm only in this couple of days now, but the potential is good for this trade with a really good target level up here. We talk about stop losses, risk rewards, and the whole strategy in the next session. What we're concentrating on today is the Elliott wave pattern, how to isolate these Elliott waves, draw the channels, support and resistance level on the week, and build that big picture. So then the next session that we do on the bootcamp is really drilling down into this strategy and trading it properly. So as you can see, this is a very early trade, but it's all the observations and rules have been met. This automatic zone in the software is there. The 535 oscillator is good. There's a high probability trade. So the next one that's I think it triggered on the same day actually, is BLMN. So let's go to the weekly first. I used the 5-year weekly, by the way, guys, not 3-year. I just want a bigger picture. I want to make sure I can have a look at all of the any potential support and resistance levels and things like that. So here we have on the weekly, it's quite corrective, but we have got a channel. Okay. So one of the main things for me is if we look back, you see the origin of my channel is this rejection of this big drop here. Then it comes through and picks up all of these levels here and here. So this is a big trend line, and from that trend line I drew my channel, and we're going to be doing that in this next hour when we look at charts I haven't prepared. So then we come down and we see the bottom end of this channel has some support here, 1, 2, 3, 4 touches, and then the midline we've got some good support here, good resistance there, a good support here where we are right now. We must put in this resistance level because that's very strong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 touches here, 8 touches there, and obviously now that's acting as support at this point. So that's our bigger picture on the weekly. We've got a channel with some good trend lines. We've got a major support and resistance level, so we go to the daily, and this is where we are right now. So let's zoom in again. Okay, this is the weekly channel, remember? The start of this current bullish trend started at the bottom of this weekly channel. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth wave has found support at 3 different levels. The weekly resistance level, the center line of our weekly channel, and in one of our zones for the wave 4 pullback. So very strong support level. The 535 oscillator has pulled back between 90 and 140%. So that's another good sign, another good observation. We've got a very simple wave 2, yeah, here, and a complex wave 4. Okay, so all our rules and observations, and we've got loads of convergence on the support level for the wave 4 on BLMN. Good, strong, high probability trade setup there. So I'm in on this one. Again, I got in Thursday. Friday had a good day. And then, you know, with potential target now, we have to consider, as these daily bars move along, our potential target is going to be quite dynamic, and this is going to act as resistance. So our target will slightly change all the time, but that's where we'll be looking to take profit and where it's going to find some resistance. Okay? So the next one is PCG. I think this one's over. I'm out of this one. I just wanted to show you. So let's go to the weekly. Okay, you can see there's a very strong channel here. This is why I wanted to give you this example. Every chart's different, but as we can see, this is the 5-week, sorry, the 5-year weekly chart. And we've got a very strong channel here. Top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom. So now we're on a wave 3 on the weekly. The center line again is important. We've got some support level here, resistance. We've got resistance and congestion here. Resistance, resistance, resistance. We've got congestion and some resistance here. So this channel is very strong on the weekly, and we're on a wave 3, so we're on a bullish move. Okay. We now go to the daily, 2-year daily, and I'm out of this trade now. But this, I just wanted to show you, this is how these work. You've got this channel in. We've had a low here, we've had a triple bottom, so that's the start of our wave count. We've had a 1, 2, the 2 is just slightly higher than the origin of wave 1. We've had a long wave 3. The wave 4 pullbacks just entered our 85% probability zone, and then I entered straight out the 6-4 moving average high and took my profit at the target. Okay, so that's simply PCG. Now, one I'm not in yet and came up in the trade room on Friday is BP. So I'm going to look at that now on the weekly first. So as you can see on the weekly, we've had a low. This is a 50, you know, this is a big, this is a weekly chart, so this is a big low for it. Since that point, on the weekly, we've got a good channel. Okay, we've got an origin here, we've hit it 2-3 times here, so that's our bottom trend line. We then look for the center line at the moment, where all this congestion is, the support and resistance all the way going through here, support, support. So this is a good center line, and obviously we're topping off at the previous wave 5 on the weekly. Yes, it did venture out here, but came back in again. The center line is more important on these channels, because this really does it's got to bring in a lot of support and resistance levels. That's more important than the top. As long as we get a good top or a bottom and the center line, and you usually find if we have got a channel, the top pretty much respects that anyway. So we've got a weekly channel in there at the moment. Have we got any major support and resistance levels? Of course we have. Let's put them in. And I can get the tool working. So we've got this pivot on the wave 3, also takes into account this as well. So this is a good level here that we want to put in on our chart, weekly level. And as you can see, currently on this weekly chart, it intersects here and the center line on the channel as resistance level. Okay, I'm going to put this wave 5 top in here as well, because that potentially could be a target zone for a trade on the daily time frame. And there's no other real ones that's going to come into where the price action is right now. I was short in WFC, Rob, but I'm out now. So Elliott wave count starts here at bar 192. Again, the Elliott wave count is in the 535 oscillator down below and is in yellow or yellowy orange. All I'm doing is put my bar across here and I can isolate that to 192. So that's where it starts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's pulled back on another 1, 2. That's where we are right now on the weekly. So let's go now to the daily, because this is the one we want to trade off in reality. This is one we want to swing trade off. And we'll look at some banks because this is my last example, and we'll look at some banks as well. So now BP is very interesting, respecting this weekly channel very well. We've had a wave 4 pullback in this weekly channel that found support at the center line, and then we've had a move higher. It did form a wave 5 there, then pulled back below the origin of the wave 4. Again, we'd have been using the 6-4 moving average low as a trailing stop, so there would have been lots of profit there. That would have caused a new wave 4 and then gone again. But where are we right now on the daily? So we're in the bottom half of this weekly channel. We've had the one. It's a very gappy stock, this, by the way, BP. Not for everybody. 1, 2, a long wave 3, which has found resistance at the center line of the channel. We've had a wave 4 pullback into the center zone, 80% probability. Let's put our oscillator on there. So again, drawing tools, Fibonacci extensions, highest point of wave 3, click, 0, click, and then back to the high point. So we'll need to zoom in on that, I think, a bit more. We're just under the 90% right now. Can you see that? We're just under. Okay, so we are there. There's potential that's going to come down even further. But at this moment in time, in the trade room, we were looking at this as a potential long. So it's met the rules so far. We'll be going into entry strategies next weekend. But basically, we've had this really good wave 4 pullback here. The target levels, obviously, this is major resistance from the wave 3, but our wave 5 is going to be either dynamic along this center line or even this weekly level here as well. So we've got to consider how we manage the trade once it starts to get to there. but again, that's like next week. So we've had this doji at the wave 4. We've had a good move away from this profit taking pullback on the wave 4. We just need some confirmation on Monday, and then we'd probably enter above the high of this green candle here. But you know, it's all about risk to reward and everything like that. But I just wanted to show you BP. So those are the ones I've pre-prepared. So now let's look at some other stocks, maybe banking stocks. Rob, did you want to look at one in particular? GS. So let's have a look at GS. So again, we're going to the weekly first. Let's build our picture on the weekly first. Because it takes a while because I'm on the 5-year, but it's important. I need to really understand what's happening on the weekly. So we've had this corrective phase on the weekly. Whoops. Here, ABC. Yeah, we've had a low point. We've had the 1, the 2, the 3, and on the weekly, the wave 4 pullback has pulled back into this zone here. So that's looking good. The channels, once we come across one, I'll show you how to draw it and put it in as a template as well, Arthur. Don't worry, we'll get some examples where we do that. So we're not going to trade it off the weekly, but at the moment we can see it's in a bullish trend. It's not in a channel, so I can't really draw one. But this profit-taking pullback that's happened over quite some weeks now, hopefully has found support and the wave 4 has been formed. So you know, we can say that it's broken this level here. So let's just draw that level in. That's an important level there. Okay, on the weekly. There's no other levels really except for, let's put that one in as well. Just in case we get a deeper pullback than what's already, we get a bit more of a sell-off. So again, this could act as support as well on the weekly. So we've got those two in. Now we're going to go to the daily, because we don't really swing trade off a weekly because you've got to hold on the position far too long. It's okay for longer term investments, but we're talking about swing trading here. So let's go to the daily, see where we are. So we're on a wave 4 pullback on the daily. This is really, really good. The only issue for me, and I'm going to measure it in a minute, is the 535 oscillator might be too deep. We had a very simple wave 2 and an extremely complex wave 4 that's quite long. Now, so let's draw this in and see where we are. I think it's broken it, but we'll do it anyway. So again, we're going to fib extensions, highest point on wave 3, click, 0, click, and then we bring that across. So it's broken the 140 line. And when we come to do the strategy next week, we have to have 7 out of 9. Well, we'll call it 6 out of 8 because one of the things we can't use on TOS. But what if one of these is one of the ones that doesn't quite meet the criteria, but our other indicators do for the strategy and the risk to reward and everything, then we can say 6 out of 8 high probability we're still going to go into the trade. I'm not saying I'm going to trade this yet, but now we can see the wave 4 pullback on the daily from this high has come back into our first green zone. It's found support at this level. This was a previous resistance level here on the daily, so it's a credible level. We've just broken through now the weekly. Now, we're not going to do entry strategies today, but I just wanted to show you this is an extremely complex wave 4 on this banking stock. So this has had quite a big sell-off from 255 down to 209. Big sell-off here. That's profit taking. The wave 4 pullback that you see is profit taking. Now it's found support, but it's found support a few times here and failed to come out. So a conservative entry here is extremely important, and we wouldn't be entering until we got above these pivots here around 230, just above $230, because it's had a wave 4 here. It's tried to break out, it's failed. It's failed here. Okay, it's come down again, it's failed again. So we've got to be very, very conscious of the behavior of this wave 4. The banking stocks have suffered greatly, and it's going to be hard to start to regain that momentum, but we need to be ready when they do, because our Elliott wave rules and observations are all good for GS at this moment in time. We just got to be a little bit more conservative on entry. It's not a true head and shoulders though, because you've got this shoulder here and a lower shoulder here, and that's extremely hard to trade. It is worrying. It could pull back further. As I say, we've got another weekly level here. We could find ultimate support for GS down at this point. This is why I'm saying an entry on this is extremely difficult at the moment because of this complex wave 4. Let me just go read this question. Would you consider a new low or high a change of trend? If so, for me on the daily, the change of trend is when it breaks the rules. Okay, when it breaks the rules, it's not broken any of those rules yet. However, we can say this is a high here. Let's just isolate this high and see where we are on an Elliott wave count then, because again we've broken that rule down here. Remember, this is an extremely long wave 3. We've got a very complex wave 4. Banking sector's not doing too well at the moment, so let's just isolate it. Let's see what the Elliott wave count is from this high and see where we are. So that is 435. So let's go into the hourglass. 435. And let's see what it tells us. So if we isolate this high here, we could say yes, it's on a bearish trend, but we don't trade the wave 3 because we don't know where it's going to end. We have to look at previous support and resistance levels from the weekly, and at the moment this one is quite sticky. It's coming down and it's going back up again. It's broken through there, but it has before. Okay, we've not really got a channel on the daily as such, although for the sake of showing Arthur how to use it, we're going to put one on this sort of small bearish channel here. So in the drawings section, we're going to go down to channel here. So click on channel. Now your default won't be the same as mine, but I'll show you how to change that in a minute. So at the moment we click on there and we can say that is a strong trend line. Okay, once we've clicked, we can then open the channel up, and again we're more interested in the center line holding some major support and resistance, which is there. Okay, now let me just go and get rid of this and get on my hand. So what I want to do to begin with, I just want to extend that up a little bit there. Okay. So your channel, if you try and draw a channel now, won't have the center line in. So if you right click on the channel, edit properties, you come down to channel curve properties, you need to tick 0.5. Change the color to yellow. Okay. When you've done that, go to your curve properties, change your color to blue and put it at width 3. So this gives us our center line of the channel, also gives us some thick blue lines for the outskirts of the channel, for your bottom and your top trend line. So tick invisible 0.5, change it to yellow, put it width 2 for example, and then on your curve properties look for color, change your color to light blue and your width 3. Okay, you then save it as default, so every time you draw a channel that will happen. Okay, Arthur? So we have got a small medium term bearish sort of channel on here, and it's respecting that at the moment. Again, this was our very complex wave 4 previously, so we're always going to be a bit reticent because it's failing so many times to break out. We have to consider if it does stay above here, if the daily price action finds this support resistance, now support from the weekly, starts to move away and it comes up above sort of 230, then we might consider an entry. But in reality, at this moment in time, if this channel holds and start to come back down again, we'll be looking at this sort of $200 level as support. So all I did was just isolate here from this high to see where we are on an Elliott wave count. I've drawn the channel in on the daily channel to see, you know, if this respects, if this breaks out and clears this channel, this bearish move is over. So then we can go back and, you know, re-isolate our sort of wave count back down here at where was it? At this low at 265. So there's lots of alternatives going on here. So hourglass, $265. Okay, apply. So now you see we're back on this wave 4 pullback. That channel stayed in on the daily. So we can use this, you know, this is the proper wave 4 here because it's not broken any rules. The wave 1, the wave 2, the wave 3, the wave 4. You know, there is a couple of observations, but I said they're not set in stone, these observations. We have got a simple wave 2, we've got a very complex wave 4, but the 535 has broken the rules. However, if this now comes out of this channel and gets above 230, we can say that this small bearish move is over. That wave 4 support has held, and we've got a wave 5 on, and we're going to go back up to this sort of level again. Okay? Yeah, what goes into calculating? It's very simple. It's a Fibonacci retracement. Okay? It's from the extreme of wave 2 to the extreme of wave 3, and then we've got 0.25. I know it's 239, but you know, I always do it 0.25, 0.382 fib retracement, 0.5 and 0.618. Okay, all I've done is tried to save people time because these are the fib levels that are set in stone between the extremes of 2 and 3. As a chart's moving and it gets a new wave 3 high, these are just automatically for you. It's just saving you time because it's a very big part of the strategy, really. So GS looking very interesting. If this channel holds and starts to come back down, we'd look for support down here. But again, that wave 4 still not broken the rules. It's still within our next channel, and if it then just it moves out of here. So this is the sort of setup when you leave this on your chart and you're just biding your time and waiting. So any more banking stocks you want to look at? JPM, let's have a look. We might see a similar story on all of them because they're all pulling back at the moment. So we'll go to the 5-year weekly. There's no Elliott wave count on there at the moment because you remember the bar count was a little higher than actual this bar count as it is at the moment. So I just need to just zoom out a bit, pick up the bar number for that low, which is, we'll put it at 0 to be honest, because it's right back there. Apply. Okay, so on the weekly we are now on a wave 4 pullback, like most banks are, because they're all in that cycle. They've got similar earnings cycles, similar news cycles, they're in the same sector, so they're all sort of positioning now for a potential pullback. So I'm not going to measure the oscillator because we're not trading off the weekly, we're just looking at it where it is in its trend. So we've had the wave 1, the wave 2, it's not pulled back below the origin of wave 1, so that rule is okay. We've had the wave 3, it's the longest wave so far. We've had the wave 4 pullback just into our zone, so all of our criteria is good on the weekly. Have we got some support and resistance levels that's going to help us right now? No. Have we got a channel? I think we have. So let's just draw it in. Sometimes it's hard to see them without drawing them in. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put the top of this previous wave 5 in here, and I'm going to put onto that wave 3. I'm going to bring that down. Again, the center point is very important for me, and that's where we are. This is a good weekly channel. Let me just get back to the hand. So let's go through this channel again. So I've took this pivot point here and the wave 3 high. So okay, now the center line, we've got major support here and here, and then it's gapped down just below the center point here. We've got resistance, support here, and then we're around that level right now. So this is a good center line. It's a good baseline. We've got support here and here and here. So this is a reasonably good weekly channel that will help us on the daily. Okay. There's no other real support and resistance levels. The only thing I might put in is this resistance level over this 3 or 4 week period here, because that's going to affect where the price action is right now. So I'm just going to put that level in here, because I think that's quite important for our for the decision on the daily. That's again, it's failed at that level there. We'll see that on the daily in a minute. So let's go now to the daily and see where we are. So as you can see on the daily, it's respected this weekly channel. We've had the low, the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4. Okay. Let's zoom in. Let's measure the 535 oscillator. So again, we want the fib extension. We go to the highest point on the oscillator for the wave 3. We click once. We go to the 0. We click again. we bring it back up and along, make sure the top 0 line is at the highest point in the wave 3, and we click one more time, and that is just within our 140%, so that's good. Let's move them back down. So as you see on the daily, we have now had the wave 4. It's just come into our first zone. Found support. Has it found support at previous support levels on the daily? Not really. So it might not be that strong. It's just popped up above the center line of the weekly channel, but it's got some major resistance to go through on this. This was from the weekly, remember, but as you can see here, we've got 1, 2. It did break through there, got a lot of congestion here, and it's failed to break through quite a number of times here. So this is a major level for us now, which might turn JPM back down again, back into a deeper zone. Now if we look left on this chart in these zones, this area here where my cursor is, that's a major support and resistance level on the daily chart, and to be honest, that's where we would expect the wave 4 to find some really good support. So if this resistance line holds here from the weekly and it does come back down on a deeper wave 4, we would expect to find support at the 78.15. So but that's still all of our observations and all of our rules are still being met. They're still in play. Okay, as you can see here, relatively simple wave 2 compared to a very complex wave 4. So you know, it's good, but also now we could say, right, you know, it's gone into our 85% zone. Have we got along? We've got a dynamic target level for JPM to go north. Its overall trend, although we've had a sell-off lately, is bullish because we're in a bullish weekly channel. On the daily, it's pulled back. We've found the wave 4. It's in our first zone. We then got to think, right, we can't enter until we get above these failures here, because at this stage that wasn't a wave 4, this wasn't, but it still tried to move higher, but it failed. So to get in just before this resistance level is suicide. Even though we've broken this center channel here, we've got to make sure it clears it, and we clear these rejection levels first. But then it comes down to risk and reward, and we talk about that when we cover the strategy in more depth in the next session. So this is where we are with JPM at the moment, but to be all honest, it's got to have a lot of juice to break through this level and make that new wave 5 high. So you know, there's every possibility that's going to fail here and come back down. So let's have a look at City. Let's go to the weekly. This one does, but I know this one's booking the trend for the sector. There's always one. So this is the weekly. So again, we're going to be looking for a channel, which I can see one. We're going to put that in. We're going to put support and resistance levels in. We can see from this low point here, we've had this sort of major correction. It's been god awful. Then we've had a nice long wave 3. Wave 4 pulls back into our zone, and then we've had a new wave 5 high. So it's behaving well on the weekly. Let's put a channel in. Again, to drawing tools, channel. I'm going to take in the lows this time. I think it's going to be quite. I'm going to take in this C. I think it's just. Sometimes you can see it, it's just about getting it right there. Again, we're more interested in the center line again, because if I go, I think that the center line there is where we are right now as well. Again, this is quite subjective. In fact, I'm going to start that again. I'm going to go from the top. I think I've got a better measure from this peak here to here, and then we come back down again. I'm looking for the center line more than anything, and when I finish drawing this, I'll go through that a little bit more. So what I've done, I've gone from the top purely because I wanted to pull in on the center line all this resistance level here. And it's probably not quite as accurate as I want, so I can adjust it. Okay, you can never get it right first time. You've got to really there. Okay, I think that's as good as I'm going to get it. But as you can see, we've got some resistance on this center line here. We've got some support here, rejection here. The center line, we've got support here, resistance, and we've just broken through it now on the weekly. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 touches on the top. Yes, we've only got one on the bottom, but we're going bullish. This is where we're looking here for this center line and this top line here. So let's go to the daily now. See this question. Yes, because it's the whole wave 4 pullback that would be invalidated. Where are we on? I'll go back to JPM in a minute and go through that. But to me, when I measured it, they were all just inside. So they're all still good. So we're on the daily now. This is the weekly channel, but we're on the daily time frame and see where we are in this. So we've missed a trade. We're late to the party on this one. But again, it's just a good example to show you how it respects these channels. The wave 4 came back from the top of the channel, entered our first zone here. Let's zoom in. Found support in our first zone and also around the center line of the channel, and then moved higher. It didn't quite make a new wave 5 high. This previous wave 3 level acted as resistance. This is why we have the trading stops with this 6-4 moving average low. You would have taken profit there and you'd be out of the trade by now with profit. Let's just measure the 535 oscillator on here because it looks very close to failing. And again, this is, it might be borne out why this failed as well. So let's go to that. So the high of wave 3, click, 0, click, bring it back up, back to the high point. Yes, it failed. So obviously we're late to this trade anyway, but it's just a good way to show you this wave 4 failed this observation here, this indicator. And so it only just came down into here, which was good. But as you can see, actually we did make money because we would have entered coming out of this blue. Trading stop could have been taken out here, or here, or here. But the idea is now we saw on the 535 that failed. Yeah. So that would have probably put you off that trade, and it's a good job because it didn't make a new wave 5 eventually. It did come back down, and if your stop loss would have been kept below there, it wouldn't have been taken out, but you would have been in this trade for a long time. No, you don't need to redo the wave count because it failed. You need to understand that there was no trade there, and you need to let this trend fizzle out, And if there's no trade on the daily, this is when we go down to the 60-minute. We know on the weekly channel this is in a bullish trend. This failed, but we know we're looking for bullish trades on City. So let's go down to the 60-minute. When I can find it. There we go. So we know the overall trend is bullish. We're on the 60. Now we're looking for intraday trades. So we're swinging off a 60-minute time frame. And we can see these opportunities were coming up thick and fast. Were they all really good? Some of them were very good. But then you've got to look at the 535 oscillator again. So this one here probably just. So let's measure it. Because because your wave 4 failed on the daily doesn't mean there isn't a trade. You come down to the 60 because you know overall it's bullish. You just got to find some good entries. So coming down to the 60, looking at your wave counts again as they happen. So say we're at this point here right now. This was where we were. We've had the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4's pulled back into our, made a double bottom really. It's not really ventured above the 6-4 moving average high until then. So we measure this here, 535. Highest point of wave 3 on this 60-minute is there. Click once. 0 is there. And high point is there. So yeah, that would have been a good trade. So just because that fails on the daily doesn't mean there's not a trade on the 60-minute intraday. We zoom right in there, we can see that point here became below the 90, so that was good. Let's zoom into this trade even more on the 60-minute. Okay, we wouldn't have entered here because of this doji here, but now we've made that double bottom. Okay, in that zone. We're now below the 90. We wasn't below the 90 there, so there's no trade. Now we look for an entry above this high of this previous red candle on the 60, and that's our long trade. Pulls back down, takes us out of trailing stop because it found resistance at the center line of the weekly channel. As you can say, with this strategy and this indicator suite, we start off at the daily, at the weekly. We put the big picture in, we go to daily, how have we got a swing trade? Doesn't quite work out on City. Let's go down to the 60. We know it's strong, we know it's bullish, but we didn't get our setup for the weekly that we like to swing. Let's go down to the 60-minute, and as you can see, there were quite a few different opportunities. There wasn't any there. You know, that could have been an opportunity, but again, when you look at the where the oscillator is at the moment, there was no opportunity there. So it's about sticking to the same strategy, same criteria, the rules and observations every single time. If it doesn't set up, it's not a trade. You don't have to reset the count, just go down a time frame. So did you want me to go back to JPM? Let's just put it back on the daily. JPM. So let's just zoom in on this here. Just to give you an idea, it came close, but it didn't break. Yeah. So it didn't break. It has so far. It hasn't broken on the 535 moving oscillator. So that still is good on JPM. But as I said before, there's a lot of other factors here with this resistance level here. But if it breaks above there, everything else works fine. We've got a potential trade. So I wanted to have a quick look at Apple because we've had some. potentially had the start of some pullbacks on some of these bigger stocks. So let's just go to the weekly on Apple. I'm going to leave those in because they're for the daily. But in fact, no, let's start again. Let's just do it all again. I was doing this in the trade room the other day, I think. So on the weekly on Apple, one big level is this level here, so we need to look at that. So we just need to put that level in there to give us some indication where a potential pullback could find support. Have we got a channel on the weekly? So on the weekly, as you can see, we've had the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4's come back into our final zone, but it's not broken any rules, okay? And then we've gone on and made a new wave 5 high on the weekly. This previous wave 3 level could be a support level for this profit taking pullback. There's no other levels really that's going to count, because if it pulls back here it's too deep. I'll put that in anyway. Better safe than sorry. Okay, so those two levels are in. We could put the channel in for this 5th wave now, but I don't think it's really going to affect. I wanted a longer term channel, and that's very tight at the moment because it's been very bullish. So let's go to the daily. Okay, so as you can see on the daily, we've had this congestion, these lows here on the daily. So this is as it's happening right now. So we've got to look at a few things here. So automatically we've had this high now, we've had this sell-offs, our zones are already put on the software for us. We have to consider this previous weekly level here. As you can see on the daily, let me zoom in. Got a bit of congestion here. So this is a previous weekly level. So this is a potential target for our wave 4 on the daily to find support. When we zoom in on the 535, we can see there's still some movement to go for this now. Okay, so we've still got time yet for this to happen. If that was a one-day wonder and it starts to climb back up and make a new high, that isn't the wave 4 we're after. We've just got to be patient. We've got to wait for some concerted sell-off over, over 5 days or something like that. So we get into these zones. Then we got to consider, right, this is a good opportunity to go long on Apple. So at this moment in time, we've got 2 potential support zones from our weekly chart. They are both in 2 of our zones from for the wave 4 pullback on the daily. Big candle on Friday with a big sell-off. I think it lost something like 3% or something on Friday. So what we have to do now is be patient and wait to see if the momentum continues and the sell-off continues. Find some sort of support. Then we'll be good for a long on Apple. Yeah, fib extension. I can show the properties. No worries. So let's just go to this one here. So we have the 0 line ticked, which is our top line, whichever color want to put that on. We have then, you have to alter this coefficient to 0.9 and alter it to 1.4. Make sure those 2 are ticked. Put it for green for the 0.9, and for the 1.4 put it pinky, reddy, purpley color. Okay, put it at 3 width so you can see it properly, and then call it whatever you want, save as default. So every time you use a fib extension, that will be the one that comes as default. Because to be honest, with this strategy, you won't be using any other fib extensions anyway. So that you're putting that as default. So just to go over it again, Arthur, line width 3, so it's nice and thick. You want 0 ticked. You want these two ticked, but you're going to have to change them to 0.9 or 1.4. Just change the colours, green and red. Then save as default. Okay? So every time you come to measure this 535 oscillator, then it will just be there as default. So that's Apple. I think another one, I can't remember now. Let's have a look at Tesla. So we've missed the boat on Tesla, and it did start to sell off, but we've missed the wave 4 on Tesla. Trying to think now. Oh, CMG I wanted to look at actually. Let's just go. Oh, the wave council. I'm gonna have to reset everything. Are we on daily? Yeah. That is pulling back quite nicely, but it's not quite. I think it was on a weekly. Let me have a quick look on the weekly. Yeah. Again, it takes a while to zoom in on these because it's 5-year weekly. But as you can see, we've come off the bottom on CMG. We've had the 1, the 2, the 3, and the wave 4 is come back into the first zone on the weekly. I'm just interested. It's quite an expensive stock. But it's interesting. It's now pulling back on the weekly on this wave 4. There's still a long way to go on the oscillator though. But it's just interesting. I just noticed this on Friday. So, is there any other tickers you want me to look at, guys? So we can just use this indicator suite and the observations and rules that we've learnt today to see where these tickers are in respect to the Elliott wave. NVDA. Okay, so we're on the weekly at the moment. That has been just a huge climb. There's not a lot we can learn from the weekly because that's just gone from 0 to hero very quickly. You know, there's not even a channel because it's just been such big price movements on the weekly. So let's just go to the daily. So the Elliott wave count's good on the daily. But what we can do longer term, because we've got this such a long wave 3 here, which is right in theory. The wave 4 did pull back, and then we just this other big move with a gap. So let's have a look at isolating something here, because it's just been one big move. And to be honest, what we've got here is we've got a double bottom. Okay, we've got a bit of a correction period here, and then it gapped up. I'm not saying there's anything there, but actually if we started our wave count something like 438 just to see what it does here, 438, because we started right back from 0, and I think we just need to isolate it a little bit more. Okay, so as you can see now, what I've done is I started here because it was a double bottom, but what it's showing that little bullish move. Then we got the correction, then a 1, the 2, the 3, and now the wave 4's coming back. I think this is better. I don't know why that's gone like that. That's really I don't know why that's stayed zoomed out or in on there. Let's just pull them down. So I think with NVDA again, what's really interesting is you've got this big bearish engulfing candle on the daily, which it signifies there's potentially going to be some profit taking pullback here. But because we've isolated it so soon, I say so soon, but we've had this big sort of correction double bottom here. This is the right wave count for this particular trend here. But now we've had that massive candle. If we get some more big candles, it could pull back and break our rules and then find some sort of support down here, which will totally ruin the picture. But time will tell. You know, isolating it here is the right call, because we don't want to be looking at a 5-year trend or a 2-year trend to try and trade the way forward, because it's been such a steep movement in price. We needed to isolate it around this corrective double bottom zone here, because then it pulled away from there. So this is the current medium term trend. Now this wave 4 put, to be honest, that was massive price action on Friday. I don't if it continues with that sort of price action, we could be coming down to this sort of level. But for our purposes, we want the support probably around about 135 in this middle zone here. So if we get normal price action, normal size candles over the next 3 or 4 days next week and find support in here, we could then go long on NVDA. But we need, I can't look right on a chart. I need to wait for the price action to happen on Monday. You think you missed the number on the fib. You got 0, 0.9 and 1.4, Arthur. You're welcome, Marabella. Let's do Baba and we'll put that extension on. Again, another stock that's just skyrocketed really. So I'm going to isolate this again. In fact, to be honest, it's probably done it. Yeah. It's gone too far. So but there's no trade on Baba because of this gap. Even though we've had a big sell-off, there's no real trade on there at the moment for me, because this gap just ruins anything that we want to look at. We can look at it on the weekly to see what an overall picture is. We'll isolate the wave count at this low, which is 55. So as you can see on the weekly, this looks better. So on the weekly, from this low, we've had the 1, the 2. The 2 has not broken the low of the origin of wave 1, so that's still good. We've had a big long wave 3. Obviously now this zone start to come in from the high of the wave 3, and then it's starting to pull back. So we can use the weekly to look at if this profit taking pullback continues, and find support at this sort of level within our zones, we could then go to the daily and the 60-minute to look for potential long positions. So we've got to just keep an eye on the weekly on BABA to see if that comes back down. So Simon, let me just go back to LEN, and we'll put that fib tool in and just go that, then we'll finish for the day. Let's put on the daily. So let's go back in again. Oops, wrong one. Go to the properties. So again, we've got 0. I've coloured that in blue. I've got 0.9. I've coloured that in green. I've got 1.4. I've coloured that in pinky red. I've put them both at 3 width. Okay. So 0, 0.9, 1.4. That's all we're interested in. And then save as default. Okay guys, that was a good 2-hour boot camp. We've got the Elliott wave rules, the observations. We've been looking at the bigger picture, how to move from the weekly, put the support and resistance levels in, how to draw the channels, then move down to the daily, looking for swing trading opportunities. If they aren't there, move down to the 60, look for intraday swings. So we're building that picture. The next session on the boot camp will be more to do with building this strategy now and getting entries into these types of trades. So we're going to be looking at some stochastics. We're going to be including the 535, all that we've done today. We'll be looking at targets. We'll be looking at putting the risk to reward on and actually working out if that's a high probability trade, looking at the entry strategy and that sort of thing. So building the whole strategy together and putting the trades together. So let me just answer some of these questions. That's right, Trevor. Regardless of where the wave 3 is, it's the highest point on the oscillator on the wave 3, because that's the biggest gap between the 5 and the 35-day moving average. So regardless if that high point does it, I mean, in this case, as a poor example, it does match, but it's the highest point during the wave 3 on the oscillator is your starting point. Then you come to 0. So you've clicked at the starting point, you come to 0, you click, you go back to the starting point, you click again, and that's where you get them from. So I mean, sometimes you'll see the wave 3 has more momentum at the bottom and it has a bigger profile on the histogram at the bottom. So it's the highest point during this wave 3 on the oscillator. So are there any more questions? You're welcome, Jay. You're welcome, Gordon.